In this episode, I talked to Danielle Ryan Broida, herbalist, nutritionist, and national educator of Four Sigmatic. We talk about mushrooms as teachers and healers of our planet, and Danielle shares wisdom about her favorite mushrooms and how they boost our vitality, help us sleep better, chill out, and be more productive. Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. It's always such a joy for me to talk to herbalists. These are people who believe in the healing power of Mother Nature. They're people who are connected to the earth. They follow their intuition. They follow nature's cues, and they're open to the magic of plants and flowers. I am constantly intrigued when I talk to different herbalists about the specialties that they decide to hone in on. And I especially get a kick out of spending time with mycologists and folks who geek out about mushrooms as much as I do about flowers. This week I interviewed Danielle Ryan Broida. She's an herbalist, nutritionist, and key player in the worldwide mushroom movement. She studied environmental studies in college, Ayurveda in India. Then she became a yoga instructor, worked with a naturopathic doctor, became a raw chef and detox coach. She led treks in the Thai backcountry, and that's where she got fascinated by herbal medicine. She moved back to Boulder, Colorado, and did graduate studies. And then she opened a private practice focusing on functional mushroom-based treatments. She's currently the national educator of Four Sigmatic, teaching the world about the importance of life with functional mushrooms. Thanks for being with us, Danielle.
Thanks for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Yeah, so you have a pretty hectic, crazy, busy lifestyle, traveling everywhere, teaching people about mushrooms, hey?
I do. It's so funny. And I always remind myself and remember, we're talking about plants and mushrooms. This is fun. And I'm so grateful that the world is wanting that all over. So much of us at the time we're thinking it's concentrated in different areas. And I'll go to random towns in the middle of the country that I've never heard of. And there's incredible, passionate people here that are foraging and taking plant medicine. And it's just amazing. So I feel like we're all waking up together.
Yeah, I was really impressed that you opened a private practice focused on functional mushroom-based treatments. How cool is that? You were literally, this is what you did before, right? But you were literally working with people with reishi and chaga and all the big ones that we know of?
Yeah. And I actually, when I opened my practice, Danielle Ryan Wellness, I didn't intend for it to be functional mushroom based. And it was kind of by clients dictated that path. So I think as the nature of herbalists, sometimes we get a lot of individuals who have tried a lot of practitioners and then end up coming to us and they're like, all right, you're often, we're their last resort. And what that brought was a lot of chronic illness and autoimmune conditions and frankly ailments where the plants, I was more restricted with what plants I could use and started turning towards functional fungi. And over time, I fell in love with them and began studying them more. And now I teach about them and my practice just evolved based on everyone that came in. So
I love it.
It's so funny because I think so many people have a plan I'm starting here and I'm going to get there. And that's just not been the case with my life at all. It's been so, okay, what shows up and where am I being asked to move and then following that. And it's been beautiful to land where I am. I never expected this. I spend my life talking about plants and mushrooms.
That's really cool. Yeah, I love spending time with people who love plants and herbal medicine and mushrooms and flowers and all the earthy stuff. It's such a great camaraderie. And it always strikes me as kind of funny, the different people and what their allies are. I'm so all about flowers and then certain people are just all about mushrooms. And then other people are all about, a particular type of herb. And
have you made mushroom essences?
I haven't. And I'm kind of fascinated by it. I think there's a fella out there who does mushroom essences.
Yes, Robert Rogers.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen his work in New York City, but I haven't. I've kind of always been intrigued by it, but I don't know enough about mushrooms to identify them. There was one trip I was on, might have been in Costa Rica, that I really wanted to make one, but then for some reason I didn't end up doing it. But I'm really intrigued by the world of mushrooms. It's such a different vibe.
It's so cool. And I love this contrast between the flowers and the mushrooms. We really see that when we talk about essences, because of course, flower essences, right? We put them in the sun, like 12 to 4, the peak of the sunlight, in your glass bowl in your spring water. With mushroom essences, it's the opposite. So you use a crystal bowl and you capture their essence in the moonlight. So it's this dark and light, and the
that
plants.
Makes sense. They're so yin.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. The plants helping us transform all these. Well, they do so many different things, but.
So let me ask you about that. You worked with flower essences in your private practice.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So have you noticed a difference when folks are working with flower essences versus mushroom essences? Like, is it much more of like a yin, what's unseen or hidden or in the cave, or is it similar to flower essences?
So I actually didn't discover mushroom essences until being full-time with Four Sigmatic. And so when I was in my private practice, it was just the flowers. And so we'll have to experiment together with the mushroom essences and then do a 2.0 once we start working with them.
Okay, let's do that. What did you notice about flower essences? Do you have any good stories of like clients or anything?
Oh my gosh, hundreds. I feel that flower essences are where the magic of herbal medicine really resides. And it's so interconnected. Especially working with people that are pretty chronically ill and dealing with some big stuff, there's a big emotional, spiritual piece to it as well. And no matter how replete we get them in magnesium or different trace minerals and, take out food sensitivities and clean up their diet and give them lifestyle practices, it's like there is this emotional piece that is so critical to be addressed for whole body healing. And that's the seat that flower essences took. And so I often say and would say I find more success with flower essences than even sometimes using an extract or pulling the constituents from the plants. And of course, it depends on the person's state. But I'm actually working with one client right now. It's like I try to be focused. And when some of my old clients are like, I just need your help real quick, I'm like, okay, come back in. And before this woman I'm working with, before putting her on any herbal formulas, we're just starting with flower essences. And I feel it's this way to almost clear the fog and see what's truly going on. We're working on her fertility, and there's so much emotional attachment to it. And so we're working with white chestnut, and I'm like, okay, let's calm your mind. It's like this spinning, racing wheel, and like a hamster wheel that we all experience. And how can we actually let that settle so we can talk from a place eye to eye and see what's truly happening, and then bring the herbs on board. So the method is different based on who I'm with.
That's so interesting. I would think you'd go after the physical and then go more subtle to the flower essence. But I like what you're saying. It's the opposite. Like you use the flower essences to kind of clear away the clutter and say, okay, what's really the priority here?
Yeah.
And then take them to the herbs.
Yep. And that's happening with this woman, but it's been different for everyone. Sometimes people are like, yeah, and you got to meet people where they're at. I think that's the beautiful thing with holistic healing and plant medicine is I could tell someone to do a million things. And if they're not ready for that, maybe it'll last for a week or a month, or they won't do it at all. So it's really like sometimes it starts as simple as having people add 1 cup of berries of their choice into their diet that week. It's like they have some crazy autoimmune condition. And before we even go there, it's like, okay, how can we build up before asking too much or trying to take away?
Speaking of building up and nourishing, something that all of us need so much of. What are your favorite ways to bring mushrooms in the conversation of nourishment and building up?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they represent. For me, I have this desire to always look at the root of what's going on. And so that's actually, I was really invested in organic agriculture and permaculture. And then I kept being like, okay, that's part of the root and getting connected, but what's even more, and got really into composting. And then through composting, I started getting passionate about mycelium, and that led into herbal medicine. And so really like what's at the root and how can we build from that place? And that's where fungi shine. Is it's not as if you have a headache and all of a sudden you take a mushroom to support that, or even have a bellyache, whatever symptom you're experiencing. They're the opposite of Band-Aids. They're really, I think of them like light switches, kind of turning on what our bodies already can do naturally. And that's so unique. You know, so many of our even amazing plant allies, they do something temporarily to either trick your body or to move things and move energy and heat or cool. And fungi are really nutritive. They're really building, supporting some of our most baseline functions like gut health and our nervous system and our immune system.
Isn't it interesting that it's like the remedies appear when we most need them? So like mushrooms weren't such a big deal 10, 20 years ago. And suddenly now that we're like, our lives are kind of spinning out of control, and we've got smartphones and EMFs and Wi-Fi and like a whole new level of a barrage of sort of external stimulus to kind of throw us off balance that wasn't happening 20 years ago.
Yep.
You know, suddenly the mushrooms are presenting themselves in full force, or flower essences or what have you.
It's so true. That just reminded me of, so I live in this home. I live at the base of a state park in Colorado in a little yellow cabin in the woods. And I caretake for an English gardener. Very strict if you know English gardeners. So the plants are everything. And she found out I was an herbalist, and she's like, okay, come, will you caretake for my home? I'm like, yes. And it was really interesting. There was Melissa officinalis, lemon balm, everywhere on the land when I first moved in. And we were having a tea one day, and I asked her when she planted the lemon balm, because there's none in our neighbors across the street. Like, it's just this lemon balm rich garden. And she said, you know, it's really interesting. There was a man living here before you, and it just started appearing as he was living here. And I asked more about him and what he was like. And turns out he was going through a lot of depression. And lemon balm is one of our premier antidepressants. And it's that wisdom of these plants. And you hear that all the time. Different stories of the medicine that we need will show up for us, and will be right in our backyard.
Yeah, absolutely. What about mushrooms? Does the same thing happen with mushrooms? I mean, like that happens to me a lot with flowers and herbs. Mm-hmm. Does it happen
so I
where
feel
mushrooms
like
will pop up?
I feel like with mushrooms, it's almost like a relationship with a cat. It sounds very weird, but they have to be ready and open to know that you're in the right space for them to appear for you. So,
well, then you have to be really good about identification too, right? I mean,
it's true. It's very challenging to identify without knowing what you're doing. And there's only about 40 mushrooms that will kill you. So there's plenty of plants that'll kill us as well. My big goal is getting rid of this mycophobia, this fear of the fungi. But yeah, I had a friend in Seattle show me these little brown mushrooms. We call them LBMs. And she's like, hey, can you identify this? It was dried out, and she hadn't done a spore print. And I said, there's thousands, I think something like 20,000 different species of LBMs, you know, so this is a vast kingdom. Yeah. And so when you're going out, I always recommend, knowing your area, go with a local mycologist, and then choose maybe 1 to 3 species that you know or grow in that area and that you're looking for. And then know the lookalikes. Same with our plants, right? If we're going to go harvest OSHA, we want to make sure we know what poison hemlock looks like and how to tell the difference. So same thing, but you do have to there's like an alignment that happens where the mushrooms know that they're ready to appear to you. It sounds really, really silly, but I was on a forage. I was taking a bunch of friends out for a mushroom walk this past fall in Colorado. It must have been spring. So we were looking for morels.
And it's my favorite.
The best. And there was 5 of us. And I said, okay, this is the landscape. This is kind of the moisture level that we're looking for. Let's all go. And we had been out there for several hours and no one found anything. And I'd been to this spot before. I'm like, I know they're here. And I said, okay, let's just stop. Like how we started this podcast with a meditation. And we're just going to ground and it's okay if we don't find any, and we were all standing around. And after about 5 minutes of just kind of surrendering, I look down, I'm standing in a patch of uva ursi, and there's a morel literally like next to my foot, like almost touching my foot. And we had all been there for over 5 minutes in this exact place. And it wasn't until we fully surrendered and dropped in that we were ready to relate to that mushroom and to find it and see it. So that's kind of more what I experience with them.
Mm-hmm. Kind of elusive buggers, huh?
They are very elusive, sneaky buggers. And yet they're everywhere. Like they're so abundant.
Under our feet, even if we can't see them. I remember being a kid. I have the best memory of being maybe 7 years old. And at the time I was living in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and my parents had some friends who were mushroom hunters, and we went out and picked morel mushrooms. And like, how sometimes you have a meal and it lodges in your memory forever?
Yes.
But to this day, I remember them just like, I think they just like sauteed them in butter and salt, like something really simple, but we had just picked them fresh from the forest. It was like unbelievable. And the beautiful shape. And it's like, God, I've never seen any mushroom like this in the grocery store. It was like just such a magical experience.
It really is. And that's where I love this relationship with the flower essence. Yeah, with flower essences, to me, they're so magical. And what we call, so many people associate mushrooms with magic. And at Four Sigmatic, our hashtag is everyday magic. And it is, they are magical. And so there are so many species that you can only find wild. You can only go and hunt for them, as opposed to many of our plants you can cultivate, depending on permaculture techniques, but anywhere in the world or indoors. But mushrooms are really elusive like that. Adds to the magic.
And then how crazy that you can have the experience, you're walking in the forest and you're like searching, hunting for something. So again, elusive, but then also you're working for Four Sigmatic. So it's like, how can you create this at scale? Like, how can you find enough, grow enough, produce enough at scale so you can benefit large populations who are in need of more adaptogenic help, right? And more building up and nourishing.
Yep. And that's why we choose to work with certain species and wild harvest only certain species, and then partner with farms that are growing ones that can be grown, log grown in a more cultivated setting. Mm-hmm. So for us, the main fungi that we wild harvest is chaga and Notus obliquus. And what's so important, and when you're choosing your flower essences, there's certain good practices that you need to rely on. And with fungi, it's so important. These species we're using, they are found wild on trees. They grow on trees. And so making sure, I almost think of it like we are what we eat. The mushrooms are what they eat. So, and there's certain species like chaga. Chaga is a parasite to birch trees. So critical that you're getting chaga from birch. And so that's one that we go and wild harvest for. We go to the largest birch forest in the world. It's called the taiga forest.
It's
located in Siberia. Yep. Yeah. And the fungi are brilliant too. There's a lot of debate out there about chaga sustainability because it is so important to get the strongest, most potent chaga, to get it from the wild. But they're wise. Like chaga will never infect a sick or dying tree, or it will only infect sick or dying trees, not the healthy trees. And, in a forest, it's really important that trees that are sick eventually are decomposed and make room for younger saplings there. So there's a wisdom that, and we don't even have to cut down the trees to be able to use it. They're amazing. They're called perennial mushrooms. So they grow back year after year. You can just take a part of the conch and it'll regrow and grow for 15 to 20 years.
Wow.
So these things are really amazing. Yeah. Wild. Yes.
So for the listeners who are like, my life is so crazy. I go to work every day. I grab my coffee and run out the door. I take flower essences. I try to work with adaptogenic herbs. What would you recommend as the top one or two or three things that people could pretty easily weave into their daily life. And obviously Four Sigmatic makes that easier in terms of like accessibility and ease, and like open the packet and you go.
Totally.
It's like in terms of like immune health secrets and energy and such. What's something just like easy that the modern crazy busy life person can do?
So the first thing I always say is look at what you're already doing. Like when we're talking about incorporating new habits, it's so critical to make sure that it'll be sustainable. I used to tell my clients, the medicine doesn't work if you don't take it. Like, okay, so what do you already do? Like, and thinking about routines is the easiest way to start. So is there something habitual? Yes. And what I want to do is help people elevate their routines. Routines are beautiful. Like it's something sustainable that we can do long-term. And that's kind of what we're trying to do is whatever routine exists, we want to find a way to almost sneak in the most nutrient-dense superfoods, which several of them are functional mushrooms, into the things that you're doing. So if someone doesn't drink coffee already, I'm not going to convince them to start using mushroom coffee. But if you do, there's like, that's what we're doing is trying to find a way to keep your habit and create a better for you option that brings these nutrient-dense foods into your habits.
Okay. So if you're the kind of person that goes to your coffee plate, like, what do you call it? Like the coffee station at your work at 2, 3 p.m. because you're getting a little dip, you would just recommend, like, if you're going to do the coffee, then have coffee infused with functional mushrooms to boost your
100%. I think that is the easiest first way to start. So one, it's a routine. So we do it all day already. There's so many reasons that we didn't even necessarily realize before combining the functional mushrooms with the coffee and chagas, or just switching to chaga if you're ready to step away from coffee. It's a great coffee alternative. It's bitter, it's earthy, it's full of antioxidant properties.
Okay, wait. Stop. I'm
going
to stop you there.
Yes.
Hold on. Let me make sure I'm understanding. So for folks who don't consume a lot of coffee, or they're like, I have my little shot glass in the morning and that's it. Mm-hmm. You're saying just do straight up chaga tea.
Yes, I am. Yeah. So if you brew just straight up chaga, it actually satisfies a lot of our coffee cravings, just flavor wise. Yeah. It's so.
I didn't know that. What the heck?
Yes.
How have I not known that? I used to make a smoothie with frozen bananas, walnuts, and chaga, but it just like never even occurred to me that I could just add hot water and drink it.
Totally. It's amazing. And it brews, it looks dark black. So you feel like you're drinking coffee as well.
Wow.
And you can mix it up with, and it's bitter. So amazing on its own. And what happens when you combine it with coffee. So we'll give people different baby steps. If you're ready to just jump to chaga, we call it chaga chinos. You can jump into that. Or this kind of intermediate step is when you combine the chaga with your coffee. It's easier on your stomach. So chaga is alkaline forming in the body. So a lot of people have issues with the acidity of coffee being really hard on our digestion. And chaga is an adaptogen, as are many of our functional mushrooms. We know adaptogens support so many parts of the body, including our adrenals, which is what stimulants like caffeine are taxing. So I almost think of our adrenals like a cup. And when we take stimulants and drink a bunch of caffeine, we're pulling from that cup, literally pulling stores. And then when we take adaptogens, we're nourishing, we're tonifying, we're refilling that cup. And so the outer experience of drinking an adaptogen like chaga in your coffee is you don't get a crash or jitters, right? Want too much caffeine, you pulling, that cup is empty. That's when you get the crash.
And also, doesn't it feel to you like it's like short-term versus long-term? So like in terms of kindness to your body,
yes.
I mean, sometimes we just need it, right? Sometimes it's like, I just need to go get a shot of espresso and that's it. I get it.
Yes.
But when you are working with adaptogens, don't you have sort of like a nice self-kindness feeling? Because you're like not only giving yourself like a slow sort of building energy, it's like you're building your energy stores for the future, like for tomorrow and the next day. And like building your essence, right?
100%. These have been called mushrooms of, or tonics of longevity and of immortality and elixirs of life, chi tonics. Like they have been so revered in several traditional cultures for thousands of years for this ability to build us up from the ground up long term, like meant to be used every day.
They're meant to be used every day.
Yes.
Do you know any like old crazy stories from China or any kind of like weird things from the past around mushrooms?
So many. I'm like, where do we start and with what mushroom? But I love talking about, because people think drinking mushrooms is new. Like, oh, that's a weird thing. And so the origin stories of drinking mushrooms is one of my favorite things to tell. And we have different history of the oldest physical evidence, the oldest pictographic evidence, and then the oldest text evidence. So the oldest pictograph is dated, it's anywhere between 8 and 12,000 years old. And it's a dancing shaman. So he's dancing, he's depicted on this cave, and he has little mushrooms growing around, like on his body. So that's
in what country or what area of the world?
Algeria.
Oh, how bizarre.
So bizarre. So in these Algerian caves, there's this dancing shaman. Yeah, I'll send you a picture. We can put it, maybe link note to this
so
podcast.
Bizarre. I would have said I would have bet money on like China or something.
So
or
that's
Asia.
the thing. Okay, now this is another great story. So beyond that, then we have the oldest physical evidence, which is, have you heard of LOTUSWEI, the Iceman? Yes. Okay. So we discovered this body. He's been named LOTUSWEI, or the Iceman, in 1991, and he was discovered up in the Ötztal Alps in Europe. And when anthropologists found him, they found all of these markings on his body, these lines, and they were tattoos. And they were originally dismissed, and they said, oh, that's kind of odd. I wonder what those are. But they studied his body. They also found he was wearing a pouch, like a medicine pouch, and he had 2 mushrooms on him that were preserved with his body.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, interesting. Humans, and, after studying more about him, they realized he was likely a person of high rank in his society, likely a leader or an herbalist, some sort of teacher. And so it's likely that he wasn't the only one using mushrooms, or not the first. But what's so striking is, so he had these tattoos, he had these mushrooms, and they studied his body. We found out he died of intestinal parasites, and the mushrooms that he had on his body would be used today to treat intestinal parasites.
Wow.
And what's even more bizarre is, so that connection, as these healing mushrooms, he was discovered about 5,300 years ago. But years later, a group of TCM, traditional Chinese medicine practitioners, were studying his body, and they realized that these lines, these tattoo markings all over his body, they weren't randomly placed, but they were actually placed over meridian lines, the same meridian lines that we use today in acupuncture, acupressure, moxibustion. And the lines were also what we'd use today to treat intestinal parasites. And so it pulls this whole question of...
Not anything new, eh?
Right. And what's fascinating, we so often attribute a life force, medicine, chi, this energy work to the East, but LOTUSWEI was found in Europe. And the whole meridian system wasn't recorded in China for years later, like several hundred years later. And so it makes us ask if the idea of a life force was actually came from west to east instead of the other way around. So too likely would have the history and the knowledge and the use of functional mushrooms.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I just love this story because it opens up, there's so much mystery in it. This was not that long ago. This is 1991 that we discovered LOTUSWEI, and we're still discovering so much. There's this juxtaposition of so much history and culture and folklore and stories of people using mushrooms around the world, and yet this acceptance of them in the modern world, and with that more science and research and understanding how much we don't know. And it just gives me so much hope.
One of the reasons why I love mushrooms is because of the concept of like food as medicine, because I see, speaking of East and West, like and this is, I speak from experience. One of the things that I saw when I worked in the health food industry for a couple years before I completely went on my own doing flower essences when I moved back from traveling around the world. Yeah. And I noticed this weird phenomenon that you're probably really familiar with too. Like if you go to Expo West or whatever, there is this sort of energy around like, what's like this year it's acai and next year it's going to be eleuthero and the year after
totally.
Like I'm like naming like old stuff, right? But it's this weird, almost like a pharma overlay of like standardized or like driver catalyst, now it's this and this is going to be. I feel like if you look at the world of mushrooms and like food is medicine, like have some shiitakes for dinner and have a cup of chaga tea in this sort of routine way that you're talking about.
Yep.
It's so much more gentle and commonsensical, and it's kind of like the way the world works, I feel like, rather than like a superhero.
Absolutely.
Drivers. You have any thoughts around that?
Yeah. I think mushrooms are definitely having a moment right now, which I'm so grateful for. I'm like, wow,
for sure.
I never thought that this weird thing that I'm so passionate about would actually be in the new highlighted Expo West. And they are having a moment, and we have to be so zoom out and understand that this is not a trend. Like this is not something you do short term. Like these are some of our greatest, most powerful allies that, I want to almost just so gently and slowly introduce them to people's lives so they start feeling and noticing the benefits, and then know that they can't live without them. Like,
essentially you want to take it your whole life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the way, they've always been used. I think of old medicine men and women stirring big cauldrons of herbs and roots and fungi medicine. And yeah, that's what I really hope we're reviving. It feels more of a remembering, bringing them into our modern day, as opposed to this is the hot new topic. Like, let's try it. And I do think there's so much deeper wisdom with the mushrooms that affect us. Like, yes, they're a food and a food as medicine. They're also so much bigger than that. Like, I love acai, great, super antioxidant properties, delicious. And there's something deeper. And that sounds so ironic. So I'm just thinking about mycelium and roots, but there's really this 1,000-year history and lore and energy that comes with bringing functional mushrooms into your life. And everyone responds slightly differently, but there's something that happens. There's a synergy that happens when we take these functional mushrooms. And I feel the closest word is a remembering. And it's really like activating our life force. I feel that light switch example keeps coming up today of I'm like, couldn't do what I do every day. I'm like, I'm so grateful for the mushrooms because I travel like 90% of the time and I'm running and so many things are asked of me. And I feel that they're these really silent ally guides that are like, we got you. And like, it's going to be okay. And bring this sense of flow and balance and equilibrium into my everyday. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember being so inspired watching a talk of Paul Stamets when he was in Boulder once for Aloha's. And, it's just like so fun to watch someone like that get so excited about how mushrooms are going to save the world.
Yes, they are. They are.
It's really fun.
It's so fun. And that's why really it's so much bigger. I think the invitation to start bringing them into your life and drinking them is fantastic. But the amount of conversations that you can have over a cup of mushroom tea or mushroom coffee it's way bigger than just making our bodies feel really good. Like it starts here, zone zero in our body. Like we got to fill up our cup to be able to overflow and have that be sustainable. But the amount of work that we're realizing that the environment and our planet truly needs and relies on certain species of fungi is so fascinating. And there's been those conversations I feel like have kind of been in the corner. They're like in kind of a dark, weird place. People aren't really talking about mushrooms breaking down plastic and using them to remediate and clean up oil spills and these incredible things they can do. Because there's been this fear. It's been weird and it's been in a corner. And I have this really, really cheesy joke, or not joke, I don't know, but I like to say it. But it's real. It's when we want to get to know something, when we want to bring it out, bring these conversations to the surface and get to know and be more familiar with something or someone, the way we do it is we sit down and we have a cup of tea with them or we have a cup of coffee with them. And that's what I feel like we're doing is, trying to introduce these mushrooms into your every morning. Like they're sitting at your table, they're sitting in your kitchen with you. We're creating this sense of familiarity. And with that, you're going to start feeling better yourself. But the world needs fungi in so many bigger ways than just for our own body. And it starts here and then continues outward. So some of the most inspiring, exciting conversations I've had about saving the planet start over drinking a cup of mushrooms.
That reminds me, I had an herbalist teacher one time describe how she sincerely felt like, and you probably feel the same way as an herbalist, that when students would start to work with a particular herb, that they were working directly with the, I don't know, you could say like the essence or the wisdom of that plant.
Yes.
And I knew a lot of herbalists that would go through her program here in Phoenix, and they would all say like, oh, my life like totally changed once I started studying herbs. And I was always like, that's so interesting, because in my world, I'm thinking flower essences, energy, so subtle, literally like the spirit of the plant.
Yes.
And yet in this world of herbalism, where it's like the tactile, like dry, chunky roots and leaves and stuff in a different way, but sort of similar, all the herbalism students were also saying like, wow, I really feel like my life has changed and transforming, and I feel the essence of these plants coming through.
Yes.
What would you say, besides like the building, nourishing factor in your experience? And this can be out of the box. This can be just sort of like you tune in and see.
Yeah.
If the mushrooms as a whole, and I realize that's kind of a ridiculous thing to say, because that's like saying flowers and there's a 40 of them. But if the mushrooms sort of had an energetic quality or wisdom about them, on an energetic, like on a more sort of subtle way, what are they transmitting?
Yeah, I feel like the way, just going back earlier to how things grow and where they grow, and that giving us information about what they can do and how they can support us. It's really similar. And in terms of the energetic essence of them, I really feel, they grow in this damp, moist, kind of dark space and are not visible and showy and look at me. They're quiet. And I think what I found is they help us to not be afraid of those parts of ourselves, but really work with some of the darker forces within us. And of course, every species is going to do something slightly different, just like our flowers. But overall, at least with functional mushrooms, there's a couple hundred that we call functional mushrooms, the mushrooms that have known studied benefits to the human body. But there's no hiding when you're taking them. It's like, okay, what's actually going on in my body? Where's the stickiness or the dampness, and how can I look at it without, it's not a fearful, like, oh gosh, I don't want to see the darkness. They feel like such allies, like supreme allies that are helping and on so many levels. Like, I think that's why they've been so revered. They're so different than doing one or five things. Like literally they do hundreds of things. And just like we were saying, we want to meet people where they're at. They really will meet you where they're at, and it's more than this adaptogenic. So they're not going to pull out things that don't exist in you, but they will show you what you need to see in a gentle way, like knowing, okay, like I got you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Totally.
Yeah.
I love it. So back to the nuts and bolts. Chaga is a favorite of yours. Do you want to mention any other favorite functional mushrooms?
Yeah, we can't mention chaga without mentioning reishi, because chaga is known as the king and reishi is the queen. And we're women and we got to talk about the queen. She's incredible. And yeah, she's one of the oldest functional mushrooms that's been written about in the first ever traditional Chinese medicine, Materia Medica. So yeah, about 4,700 years ago, we have this written text about reishi. And it's so hard to put her in a box. And I want to talk about every mushroom for a whole hour show, but I find that can be really confusing for people. And so what I try to do, and what we've done at Four Sigmatic too, is kind of give every mushroom a character or a word to make it a little bit more digestible. And yet I always preface that by saying that's not all she does. So we call reishi the chill mushroom, but it's so much bigger than that. So my hope is that people continue to explore and discover and not be like, oh, cool, reishi, like chill. I'm going to take it before I go to bed, have a deep night's sleep. Like, good. That's what reishi's for. Because it's just like, I call these talks I do sometimes unraveling the mysterious. And I think that's what we're doing. The more we incorporate fungi medicine into our life is finding more and new ways that they are working with our body and supporting our body. But reishi is fantastic. It's almost that idea that we talked about earlier with clearing the fog. There's so much of us today that are dealing with stress on many levels, and it's pretty unavoidable, right? There's environmental stressors, and whether it's our food and our water and our air, and then of course within our own bodies and minds, we have stressors. And what reishi can do is really deeply support that stress response and almost act like pulling away a layer to see what's actually going on, right? She takes us out of survival mode of like this hyped up, I'm full of stress hormones and I'm in fight or flight, which we are it's crazy how many of us are in that state today for so many hours of our day and our life. And it's hard to know what's truly going on, right? Talk about that like root-based approach. It's like sometimes someone might be having headaches or digestive issues or difficulty sleeping and not necessarily relate it to being stressed. And so instead of just treating like, okay, here's some passion flower to go to sleep, or here's some ginger, take this and your belly will be better. When we take reishi first, that survival layer kind of melts away and we can see the body can start functioning again. You know, like when we're in fight or flight, we're not getting the right signals that we're hungry or we're tired, or all these secondary parts of being a human being take the back seat so we can survive. And once reishi's incorporated, even after a couple days, a couple weeks, and it depends on the body and stress level and liver and so many things, but she really is like the most effective way to see what's truly going on. Like, let's clear the fog and see what remains once we've supported the nervous system. And yeah, so chill with reishi, and so much bigger than chilling.
And if you had a word for the king chaga?
We've changed the word a couple times, but it's like defend would be. And so chaga is one of the most antioxidant rich foods on the planet, like especially Siberian chaga that's been extracted properly, double extracted. And we can talk about that if we want. But yeah, and so incredibly supportive to our immune system. And so I think about chaga, like we've also called chaga your daily bodyguard. So this idea that when your immune system's so strong, when you're full of antioxidant properties, even if you walk in a room and there's a bunch of sick people coughing all over you, you're not going to be a host for whatever it is they might be carrying, right? You're your own daily bodyguard.
I love it.
That's the king and queen.
Okay, so that's the king and queen. Any
Yes.
others that you would recommend?
One more that's really having a moment. I feel like different mushrooms have their moments, and lion's mane, we have to bring up lion's mane. Really wonderful, not having anything to do with the mane of a lion. Curaceum erinaceus common name, one of many common names is lion's mane, because it is a white cascading fungi that grows off the sides of trees and slightly resembles the mane of a lion. But we call lion's mane, you can think lion's mane for the brain, but we call lion's mane our think mushroom. And classic American culture, and just really so many of us in the West are asked, whether it's internally or from our society, to do more productive, more efficient, faster. And we're reaching for, I think, a lot of things that are not sustainable long-term, whether it's that extra cup of coffee or like whatever else you use to prop up. And so lion's mane can offer the support of productivity and really helping kind of focus. And it's like, I explain how I feel on lion's mane. If you've had those moments, you sit down at your computer and you bust out emails and you look at the clock and you realize 3 hours have gone by. You're like, whoa, how did that happen? You're just so like tuned in. That's kind of how lion's mane feels in my body.
Okay. So that sounds like a good ritual. Like a cup of lion's mane tea/coffee with some dark chocolate for like financial accounting, taxes, like something that you need a lot of brain cells for.
I love that. Yes. We have one mushroom chocolate bar. It's like, maybe shouldn't even say this on the air because it melts.
I didn't know that.
I know. We only sell it. We'll sell it for Valentine's Day and sometimes over the holiday, but it has the top 10 functional mushrooms that we use across our line. So we have lion's mane, chaga, and reishi are all in there, along with 7 others. And so it is such a good mushroom chocolate. Are you guys
bringing it back in February?
Yes. Okay. So I guess, this is good timing, like plug for then. Yeah. But you can make it on your own. I'm like, so want to encourage DIY and people finding creative, fun ways. And that's what's so fun about what we've done with our powders is they're pre-extracted. People think you have to mix them with water. You don't. I'm like, whatever way.
In a smoothie, right?
Smoothie, make chocolate, lion's mane chocolate. We have to make that. We'll send pictures and maybe post our recipe on the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
It's so easy. I mean, like you can do, I love making like truffles with dark chocolate. Basically, you just like heat the coconut milk. You could add the lion's mane at that point and then pour it over chopped up dark chocolate and then you refrigerate it and then you can like roll it out in balls or you can just eat it with a spoon.
Yum. Oh my God, I want that
fun.
Now. Yeah.
We should do that. Okay, so
we should do that, eat them, and then podcast 2, we're going to be on lion's mane and see the difference in our brain. Okay, we're in it now.
That's a great idea. Okay, so I do want to ask you lastly, like, because you are with Four Sigmatic, so I want to like give some props to an amazing company. And like, can you just give a quick rundown if the listeners either haven't heard of you or don't know everything you offer? Just like a quick, and also that they're in packets. So it's like so easy to travel. This is like my favorite thing to do when I'm on a plane.
Yep.
And you don't want to drink like the yucky coffee or on the plane or something. And just to have those packets with me, like travel friendly. So great. So what give us like,
who are we?
What you got?
Yeah, so we're a superfood company. We focus on functional mushrooms, but our whole goal is to elevate daily staples and create better for you options for the things that people do daily. So we started, we have mushroom coffee for the morning, mushroom hot chocolate for it to unwind in the evening. Delicious. Like we realize again, the medicine won't work if you don't take it. And these mushrooms on their own are pretty dang bitter. So we combine them with, organic spices and coffee and cacao to make it really, really delicious. Like I think that's a big fear for people of like, oh gosh, what is mushroom coffee going to taste like? And it tastes like coffee. Like all of our products taste like what they are. But yeah, so from beverages to plant-based protein, we're a fully plant-based company, to we actually have skincare that's coming out. I'm like, whenever this launches, it'll be out, but we're just on the verge of the next couple of days, fully 100% edible skincare.
Wow,
we believe like only using whole food ingredients. So, what we put on our skin should be as clean as what we put in us, if not cleaner, and really trying to make it so easy, so seamless for people to bring some of the most powerful plants, herbs, mushrooms into their lives long-term, like into their routines.
What does Four Sigmatic mean?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. So if you take all the edible foods in the world and you put them on a graph based on their nutrient density, some foods are horrible for you, some foods are amazing for you, and most foods are okay. So if you can picture what this looks like, there's a bell curve that forms. Horrible one end, awesome the other, and most in that center of the bell curve. And if you draw mean in the center of this bell curve, every standard deviation from the mean is called a sigma. This is with any graph of natural distribution. So you can go negative sigmas and the foods get worse and worse for you, lower in nutrient density. So I think corn syrup and GMOs and processed refined sugar, et cetera. And then in the positive sigma directions, the foods are getting more unique, more rare, more nutrient dense. So 1 sigma foods are whole foods, things that our great-great-grandmothers would recognize, nothing with an ingredient fact panel label on it. And 2 sigma foods are staple foods. So these are things like our grains, legumes. 3 sigma foods, we start getting into health foods. So these are where a lot of our fruits and vegetables fall into, brassicas, garlic and onion, and some of our greens. And then 4 sigma foods. So 4 sigmas from the mean of all foods, there's about 50 to 100 foods that fall into that category. And these are the 50 to 100 most nutrient dense, most researched foods on the planet. The creme de la creme.
Awesome. Oh, I love it.
Yep. And Sigmatic means nothing. We made it up. Our old name was Four Sigma Foods, and that was too long. So we just created the word Sigmatic. But that's the meaning behind it, that we're using. And about 10 of those Four Sigma category foods are functional mushrooms. But there's others like cacao and ashwagandha and tulsi and some of our other favorite plants and superfoods.
And are you guys working with those as well?
We are. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have an amazing adaptogen coffee, which is actually chaga, ashwagandha, and tulsi. And
what's your favorite? What's your favorite from what you guys have?
Of all the products? Oh boy. I think it changes every day and every moment based on what my needs are.
Sure.
But I'm going to say just really classic today is our Lion's Mane coffee. I love to ask people why are you doing what you're doing, whatever it is? What are you trying to get from that? And I feel like so much of us are looking for that light bulb in our brain, turn off and drink coffee. And what we're trying to do is create a more effective option for that why, while taking away a lot of these negative side effects like jitters and a crash. And so I think it's the most easily integrated into your routine. So delicious and it works. I do it every day.
I'm going to put that in the chocolate truffles.
I'm going to send you a bunch. Don't worry. Then we'll have a recipe book together.
Oh my God. Anything into chocolate. It's like the way to my heart.
Yes. I'm going to send, we have a reishi hot chocolate. That's so good. That's going to be your favorite.
Okay. Last question I have for you.
Awesome.
Any words of wisdom on any level that you find yourself commonly telling people that have to do with the theme that we're talking about, or something completely different, that just come from Danielle, or that spring to your mind in this moment?
Yeah, I think we've been talking about, in subtle ways, surrendering and how that brings us to where we're meant to be. And we have tools to help us surrender. And I think there's a lot of people feeling disconnected and alone. And I just want to remind everyone that's listening that there are hundreds of allies in the form of plants and mushrooms that are here to support you at every stage of your day and your year and your life. And the more we can let go, it sounds really silly, especially in my life, I'm constantly planning and running. And I find that it doesn't leave a lot of room for magic and those unexpected things that are meant to show up and that are probably showing up all the time, but that we miss because we're looking at our phone or our calendar or whatever next thing is lined up. And what I've been working on lately, and I just got off a week sailboat in South America, so that helps, of fully surrendering with every wave, but truly, like, how can we, even in little ways, whether it's clearing something, like learning to say no, clearing something so that you have space to be quiet, to surrender, to listen, and see what comes up. It's pretty magical.
I love it. Amen, sister.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us on the Flower Lounge.
Thank you. It's been so much fun.
Thank you so much for listening to the Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.